Guys, guess what today is? It's Chocolate Cake Day, National Chocolate Cake Day. Did you know that was a holiday? I didn't know that was a holiday. We have to make a chocolate cake. We're going to make Hannah's chocolate cake. Come in the kitchen with me. This is going to be fun. Chocolate Cake Day.
First, preheat the oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. This recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of butter, so we're going to cut one of the sticks of butter in half. Then we're going to use the extra half stick of butter to very generously grease our Bundt pan, making sure to get down into all the little creases and crevices. Next, sprinkle some unsweetened cocoa powder into the pan and tilt and shake the pan to coat the inside of the pan with the cocoa powder. You might need to use your fingers to get it on the stem of the pan. For the cake batter, we're going to start with 4 ounces of unsweetened baking chocolate, which we're going to unwrap and chop up into good chunks with a knife. Watch your fingers! The size of the chunks isn't super important. We're just cutting it up into smaller pieces so that it'll melt more quickly and evenly. Put the chocolate chunks into a microwave-safe bowl. And then we're going to microwave it 30 seconds at a time until the chocolate is melted smooth. The number of times it's going to take is going to vary depending on different people's microwaves, so you'll just have to do 30 seconds at a time until your chocolate's nice and smooth. And there we go, smooth as silk. Look at that chocolate. Now we're going to let the chocolate cool down while we mix up some dry ingredients. We'll start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Then we'll add 1 teaspoon of baking soda and half a teaspoon of salt. Make sure you mix them up together really well because you don't want any little chunks of salt or baking soda popping up in your cake. Next, we'll add our 3/4 of a cup of butter straight into the mixer bowl. Make sure you get all the little bits of wrapper off. And then we're going to turn on the mixer until the butter is nice and creamy and smooth. Then we'll add 1 cup of granulated sugar and 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar. While that's mixing, we'll crack 3 eggs into a separate bowl. It's a really good idea to put them into a separate bowl instead of just straight into the batter in case you get any little bits of eggshell that need to be fished out. Then we're going to add the eggs into the batter one at a time so they don't overwhelm things, and let them get mixed in thoroughly. Now we're going to add in our melted chocolate and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. When that's thoroughly mixed together, we're going to start adding in the dry ingredients we mixed together before, along with 1 1/4 cups of water. And we're going to just alternate between the two and let it mix in until both of them are gone. You may need to scrape down the sides of your bowl a few times in the process. Pour the batter into the pan, smooth it out, pop it into the oven. We're going to bake it for 55 to 60 minutes.
Now we wait. And I vote while we wait, let's read a story. If you don't want to read a story with me, I'll put a time code you can skip ahead to so you can skip this part and just see how the cake turned out. But for those of you who want to stick around for the story, here goes. Chapter 1. Hannah stopped in the middle of the street, shifting the covered cake plate to her other hand so she could wipe her sweaty palm on her jeans. This was what came of 3 grown women playing truth or dare while watching the new neighbor move in. Not that there had been much to see with that big flutter pod squatting in the way. It was gone now, but there was still nothing to see. Watching an extraterrestrial move in ought to be more entertaining. More than 8 years had passed since the first embassy ships landed. but the aliens kept to themselves, evidently preferring to observe humanity from a distance. The few Telesinans who came to Earth tended to stay in the embassy enclaves, and most people still hadn't seen one of the aliens in person, especially not in small towns like Freebridge. Hanna glanced over her shoulder at her own little house, where Rachel and Tiffany peeked through the curtains of her living room window. "Keep going!" Rachel's voice came from the phone in Hannah's back pocket. "I'm going!" Hanna drew a determined breath. "But if you don't stop talking, I'm taking you off speakerphone and hanging up. This is bad enough without getting caught with letting my friends listen in." Her pocket was silent. Hanna made it to the other side of the street before her phone chirped, alerting her that a new text message had been received. She stopped again, juggled the cake back to her other hand, and fished her phone out of her pocket. The message came from Tiffany's phone and said, "Is this better?" "What is wrong with you people?" Hanna muttered in mock irritation. She didn't want to admit how reassured she felt, knowing someone would call the police if she screamed. None of them said so, but all three of the women knew this was the real reason Hanna had invited her friends over in the first place. The dare was just her friend's way of giving Hanna the courage to face the man who'd purchased the acreage on the other side of her dead-end country road. It would have been hard enough if he'd been merely human. This was so much worse. But Hanna needed to do this, and she needed to do it alone, needed to know she could do it alone. After all, the guy was going to be her only neighbor. She couldn't avoid him forever. Best to get this over with. Squaring her shoulders, she stuffed the phone back in her pocket and marched across the neighbor's newly sodded lawn and up the steps to the front porch. Not giving herself time to back out, Hanna thumbed the doorbell once, hard, and plastered a fake smile across her face. He answered the door so quickly that he must have been watching her out the window this whole time, and Hanna abruptly found herself staring at the middle of a broad, well-muscled chest covered in snug black t-shirt. He was tall, really tall. Hannah's breath caught in her throat, and her cheeks warmed in a blush that would perfectly complement the fake smile. Oh yes, this was going well already. "Good afternoon." His voice was a rich baritone, and apparently he spoke English. That was something, at least, even if his slight accent was a bit unsettling. "How may I help you?" Hannah steadied herself with another deep breath and looked up into his face. He could almost have been some kind of Latin pop star, all olive skin and high cheekbones with solemn hazel eyes rimmed in dark lashes. His black hair, pulled back into a complicated arrangement of tiny braids, fell nearly to his shoulders. As calmly as she could manage, Hannah gave the speech Rachel had made her memorize. "My name is Hanna Bradley. I live across the street. I saw you moving in this morning, and I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. I brought you a chocolate bundt cake." She held out the cake plate, hoping he didn't notice her hands were shaking. What if they didn't eat cake? What if chocolate was toxic to them like it was to dogs? His generous mouth stretched into a smile, and as he reached for the plate, Hannah's eyes flicked to his hands. Sturdy, flexible membranes webbed the spaces between his long fingers. She'd expected that. Everyone knew what Telesinans looked like. Pictures of them were all over the internet and in the media. But seeing one in real life, in broad daylight, was different. "How very kind of you, Hanna Bradley," he said solemnly with a slight bow. "I am John and Tathanel of House Canistell and Ayr, and I am most pleased to make your acquaintance. Will you come in?" He took half a step back, giving her a little space to breathe, and invited her into his home. Hannah's heart stuttered. "Oh," she said, "I just, um," her phone chirped again. Tiffany was not letting her off the hook. Sure, but only for a minute. I don't want to interrupt your day." Her heart pounded harder as she followed the tall alien through a spacious living room and formal dining room and into the kitchen at the back. It looked like a regular house any human might live in. At least, any human with a little more money than average. The floors were all hardwood, the furniture was all new, and the kitchen had mahogany cabinets with granite countertops and high-end appliances. One side of the kitchen opened out into a large casual family room with luxurious-looking carpet, an enormous television, a sprawling sectional sofa, and a scattering of oversized beanbag chairs. It was a disconcerting kind of ordinariness. "You have a beautiful home," Hannah said, feeling a need to make some attempt at a conversation. "I've enjoyed watching it being built and wondered what the inside would be like." It sounded stilted. She didn't care. Just keep breathing. "Did I hear the doorbell?" Hannah jumped at the sound of the new voice and felt the fading warmth of her blush deepen again as her heart climbed up into her throat. There were two of them. The second Telesanin man emerged from a hallway behind them, which presumably led to the home's bedrooms, and offered Hannah a friendly grin. Considerably shorter than the first, with a stockier build, this alien had short brown hair and an open, freckled face. The first man hurried to make introductions. "This is our neighbor, Hanna Bradley, from across the street. She has come to welcome us to the neighborhood." The second man offered a small bow. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Bradley." "Please," she said, looking back and forth between the two, "just call me Hannah. There's no need to be so formal." The shorter man grinned. "I'm honored, Hannah. Call me Tommen. And my friend is John. I suppose he introduced himself so fast that you have no idea what he actually said." Tommen's English had hardly any accent at all. Well," Hannah stammered. "John," Tommen scolded, "I told you, you have to slow down. Maybe you should let me answer the door for a while." The big man grinned and shrugged. "It is my house, and I need the practice." He held up the cake plate as if it were a rare prize. "Hannah has brought us He looked sheepish. "What did you call it, Hannah?" Hannah felt her blush deepen even more. "A chocolate bundt cake? It's a type of dessert." Tommen's face lit up. "I love chocolate cake. Chocolate is definitely one of the things Earth got right without us." He took the cake plate from his friend and set it on the counter. "You'll have to forgive John. He's spent a little time here in the early days, but he's been a signed-off world ever since, and he's still getting used to how things work here." He took the cover off the plate and eyed the cake with pleasure. "You'll stay and have a piece with us, won't you?" "Thanks," Hannah said, edging backward. "But I can't. I need to be getting home." Her phone chirped. "I haven't had lunch yet." It chirped again. "How very fortunate," John exclaimed. "You must allow us to reciprocate by buying you lunch. I am sure you know which restaurants here are best." Hannah's phone chirped again. "I'm supposed to meet up with some friends for lunch today," she explained. Again, the phone chirped. "Do you need to get that?" Tommen asked. "Maybe I'd better at least check." Hannah fumbled the phone out of her pocket and looked at the display. Tiffany's texts read, "Say yes. Are you nuts? Tell them to meet us at Max. Want to see them too. Dare you?" "Is everything all right?" Tommen asked, and Hannah realized she was scowling at the phone. "Yes, sorry about that." She stuffed the phone in her pocket and pasted the fake smile back on her face. Um, Listen, my friends are waiting for me, but why don't you join us for lunch? Mac's Bar and Grill is only a couple of miles up the road on the edge of town, and we can save you some seats at our table." Hey, that's where we're stopping for today. You can read the rest if you buy the book. Now we're going to go check on our cake.
You can tell a cake is done when a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean, or at least doesn't have any goopy cake batter on it. Let the cake cool for 10 to 15 minutes before removing it from the pan. You can give the cake kind of a few gentle shakes to see if it's loosened up, and then invert your serving tray on top of the pan and just very carefully tip that cake over. Then you can lift the pan off the cake and ta-da! Magic! Chocolate cake. So we'll just center it up really carefully, and then we'll dust it with powdered sugar by putting in the powdered sugar in a sieve and then just tapping it over the cake. Then we just sit back and admire and eat it. We have to eat the cake.
All right, friends, moment of truth time. What do we think? Let's try this out. It's a good chocolate cake. It's got a nice texture. Not too sweet. Good chocolate flavor. I approve. I think Hannah did a good job. No wonder John liked her. I'll put a link to the recipe in the description. If you make Hannah's chocolate cake, I would love to know what you think of it, and I would really love it if you posted some pictures on social media and sent me a link so I can see it too. In the meantime, happy Chocolate Cake Day. I will see you again soon.